It's a case of everything must go for the Albanese government today as it brings more than 30 bills to the Senate floor on the final sitting day of the year and possibly this term. The government's Black Friday wish list includes the social media ban, the future Made in Australia bill, changes to the Reserve Bank and electoral reform.
It might have to take a rain check on that last one. An 11th hour breakdown in negotiations with the coalition means it could be forced to shop around with the crossbench, and they're likely to drive a hard bargain, with the suspension of independent Senator Lidia Thorpe making their votes even more valuable. It's going to be a big day at Parliament House, and that's where political reporter Peter Lusted is. Peter, a huge day for politicians. What's on the agenda?
Well, we've got about 36 bills listed, so Labor will try to guillotine them, that is, stop debate and try to force them to a vote to try to get the legislation through, or at least be able to go to an election campaign saying we introduced this, but it was blocked by others. Now, there are some bills we know will pass because the coalition has pledged their support. One of those is for a social media ban for people under the age of 16. Another is a combination of 3 immigration bills, including one of which would see Australia be able to pay other countries to take convicted criminals that Australia has been unable to deport. There is plenty of other bills, though, that are up in the air. Some of those include tax credits for critical minerals, the build to rent legislation, which is aimed to get more affordable rental properties into the market. There are also proposed changes to the Reserve Bank and privacy laws. But what's confusing matters even more is what you touched on at the top there, is that independent Senator Lidia Thorpe has been suspended for the week. Yesterday, she ripped up a motion from Pauline Hanson, the senator there, and threw it at her. So she's been suspended for the week. Now, that confuses matters more because the Labor needs to get through legislation in the Senate, its votes, plus those of the Greens and another 3 crossbenchers. So they'll now have to fill that void. Here is that in Lidia Thorpe's words.
And it makes it very difficult for the government to pass legislation because they needed my vote. So I hope they have a good day in the Senate and, you know, they may not be able to pass the legislation that needs to be passed today because they suspended me from participating, and they've suspended me for standing up to a racist.
Independent Senator Lidia Thorpe there spelling it out that with some of the legislation today, Labor may have been banking on her vote, so they may need to get that now from another crossbencher to get some of these bills across the line.
Peter, the government's electoral reforms, they could be in turmoil as well.
Yeah, we've actually just had some breaking news on this. Katie Gallagher, Senior Labor Minister, has just spoken on RN and said that these reforms will not be introduced, that Labor has not been able to reach a deal with the coalition. Now, these are electoral reforms. Some of the changes are that they would set a cap on political donations to $800,000 per seat or $90 million per party. Now, the reason it's not going ahead, we have heard from the coalition this morning, they have raised some concerns. One of their concerns is changes to the political donation threshold and what you have to make public. Previously, you had to only make it public if you spent around $17,000 in donations. That's proposed to come back down to $1,000. The coalition were concerned that that could add a burden to small businesses as if they wanted to donate. And here is the Shadow Treasurer, Angus Taylor, talking about that.
The balance needs to be struck, which is the right balance between making sure we have that transparency that I think is so important, but also making sure small businesses and others can get on and do what they want to do. And that balance is incredibly important.
The Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor there, he was talking about the coalition's sticking points to get these electoral reforms passed. Clearly they're quite passionate about it because, as mentioned at the top there, we have heard from Katie Gallagher today from the government saying that Labor has not been able to reach agreement with the coalition on electoral reforms, so that legislation won't be put up in today, which is of course the final sitting day of the year.
Okay, going to be a busy one. Peter Lusted, thank you.
We want to take you to WA now because firefighters there are battling an out-of-control bushfire that's threatening the coastal town of Cervantes, north of Perth. An emergency warning area covers the town as well as parts of Wedge Island, Cooljaloo and Nambung. Chloe Henville is there for us and sent this report.
I'm here in Cervantes as residents are being told to evacuate. There's been an increase of firefighter activity in the town. As you can see behind me, there is thick smoke, and this wind that's pushing through is making the fire hard to predict. The coastal town is about 165 kilometres north of Perth and has about 500 residents. They're being urged to pack up and leave, heading north before this uncontrolled bushfire causes any road closures. The fire has been burning since about 11 a.m. on Monday, with the DFED's incident control officer saying it's moving at a rate of about 3 kilometres per hour. Cervantes homeowner Alan Berishan says while he's not panicking at this stage, he's definitely planning on evacuating quickly and calmly. We've seen other residents packing up and heading north as well.
The locals here are very, very good at this sort of stuff, so they've seen it before. This isn't their first rodeo, so I don't think there's too much panic.
The fire has burnt more than 37,000 hectares of mostly bush and scrubland. There are about 200 personnel on the ground, including firefighters and other staff, and there is an aerial crew assisting as well.
Chloe Henville with that report. The National Firefighters Union is pushing for nationally consistent access to compensation for cancers linked to their work. Existing state-based schemes are designed to simplify access to entitlements by removing the requirement to prove firefighting as the cause. But the number of cancers included differs by jurisdiction. Advocates argue this creates an uneven playing field between the states.
The man described by police as one of Australia's worst paedophiles will face a 2-day sentencing hearing in the Brisbane District Court. Ashley Paul Griffith was arraigned on more than 300 charges and pleaded guilty to abusing dozens of children in early learning centres between 2003 and 2022.
New data reveals Australians are spending big on medicinal cannabis. Drug policy organisation the Pennington Institute has found sales this year are on track to double 2023 figures, with Australians having spent $400 million on medicinal cannabis products in the first 6 months of this year. The Institute is also calling for a regulated market to be established for personal use of cannabis, arguing the current criminalised model doesn't work.
The South Australian Government is funding workshops about coercive control. It's aimed at educating young women from multicultural communities amid state police reporting a 15% rise in domestic violence rates. A bill to make coercive control illegal will soon be debated in the state parliament's upper house.
Canberrans have been reporting Scarab beetles are descending on their homes and businesses in large numbers. An entomologist says warm and humid weather is likely to be behind the increase, but although they can be a bit of a nuisance, they won't do any damage.